Hey Dev team, welcome back. Flutter with Drag here, and we're going to put in the final touches to this quiz app now. We're going to try and save some high score details to the Firestore server and retrieve them in an high score table. So let's get cracking. And I'm going to start with the quiz page state, because one of the things we're now going to want to store is the start time of the quiz, so that we can work out how long the person has taken to do the quiz. So I'm going to save that as a string. It's just easier than trying to deal with date times, and when it comes to Firestore, timestamps, or the date time that we would store in Flutter is stored as a timestamp, and it needs to be converted from one to the other. It gets complex, so we're going for the simpler solution here. Okay, so we're going to have the start time, and we need to set that up. So this start time, and we're just going to default that to an empty start time. We're going to need to include that with our copy with. So we will put that in here, and we'll say if a start time has been copied, then use it, otherwise use the initial start time. Okay. It also needs to be a prop that we monitor. And I'm not sure why my emulator's been quite slow today, but there we go. Not my emulator, my autocomplete, but it is. So there we go. Right. Let's do something with that start time. And what we're going to do is in the quiz page.block, we're going to, when we start the quiz, we're going to set the start time to be the current time. So date time now, but we're going to convert that to an ISO 8601 string, because that's easy to convert back to a date time later on. So now we have the start time, we can come to our quiz finished page, and we've got the score. We're getting the score here. What we can also do is get the start time and see how long it's taken. So we're going to create a string time taken equals, and we're going to take the date time now, and we're going to find the difference between the date time, which we're going to pass from the start time string. And so that is in the context.read. And again, we can leave it as read because it's not going to change at this point. Quiz page block. And I'm just going to put some commas and things in place to format it. Quiz page block state dot start time. Okay, now we need to convert that to a string because it's a number. That difference is going to return an actual difference, and we need that to be handled differently. Now, in fact, what we need to do is make a helper function so that we can format it in a better way. So, do we have a helpers? We haven't had any helper functions yet. So in our lib folder, I'm going to create a new file called helpers.dart, and I'm going to create a function that returns a string, which is going to be convert duration as time string. We're going to pass in a duration, which will be the duration, and we're going to return a string. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to want to return number of minutes and seconds. I mean, you might want hours, but I'm just going to do minutes and seconds here. And I think we want the minutes and seconds to be 2 digits. So if they take 4 minutes and 6, they take 4 minutes and 6 seconds, I want that to be printed as 0406. I think that looks neater. So we're going to create another sort of mini helper within here that will do that, which we're going to call 2 digits. And that's going to take an integer and return that same integer as a string, but padded left 2 and padded with 0. So what that does is it'll make sure that there's always 2 characters in the string, and if there aren't 2 characters, it'll pad on the left hand side 0 until there is 2 characters. So it'll convert 1 into 01 and convert 22 into 22. Okay, then we need to get the number of minutes that are there. So we're going to take a string called mins, and we're going to run that through the 2-digit little helper that we've got there. And what we want is to take the duration in minutes, remainder 60. Then we're going to copy that line, and these are going to be seconds, so I'll call it secs, and we want duration in seconds. And what these functions are doing, well, here we're taking duration in seconds, so let's assume it's taken, say the whole quiz has taken 63 seconds. So what it's going to do is it's going to take the duration as 63, and it's going to get the remainder after 60, after it's divided it by 60, and that will be 3. And it will do the same, because we're only getting the remainder, if it was 2 minutes and 6 seconds. That would be 126. So 126, the remainder after it's been divided by 60, would still be the 6 seconds. And it's doing the same for the minutes. And then after we've got that, we want to return our string. And our string is going to be well, we could put hours here. We'll just assume anything else is hours. So 2 digits dot duration in hours. And I'm going to make the assumption we're not going to go into days here. The quiz isn't going to take days. Then we'll take the minutes, and then we'll take the seconds. I need to put a curly bracket in there and not at the end. Okay, so we're returning the hours it's taken, padded, then the minutes, then the seconds. That's our helper function done. So coming back to our quiz finished, the time taken can now be the convert duration as time, and the duration is going to be that, and then we don't need this to string on the end. Then all we need to do is display that. So after the score, I think we'll then put a text which says you took, and then the time taken, and we'll put a size box after that as well. Okay, let's save that, do a hot restart and test that out. So we'll do our general knowledge 2 quiz. We're not signed in, it doesn't matter at this point. So let's do our quick quiz. and we took 9 seconds. That felt about right. Okay, now we want to persist that to storage and save that in a database. So let's start by creating a model for that, and I'm going to create a new file in our model folders, and I'm going to call this a result model. Class result. What are we going to save? Well, we're going to save final string as the date that the quiz was done. I want to save the nickname of the user who did it. I want to save the score, and I want to save the time, which is going to be the time it took, and it's going to be the time in seconds. Let's generate a constructor for that, and we're also going to need to map this information into convert this object into a map. So let's do this. Map string dynamic, because the key is always going to be a string and the value is different. It could be a string or it could be an integer. And I'm going to call this to Firestore map. And that is going to return a map with date, which will be the date, the nickname, which will be the nickname, the score, which will be the score, and the time, which will be the time. And then we need a way of converting it back from a document snapshot, which is the type of document that Firestore holds. We'll see that in a minute. So I'm going to create a factory, which is a result from snapshot, and that's going to take in a document snapshot, and that's going to return a result, and I'll just format that first. Okay, and so the date is going to be the snapshot date, and we'll just copy that. The nickname is going to be, well, actually we can just do that, snap nickname. The score is going to be snap score, and the time is going to be the snap time. So we can convert it to a Firestore map and from a Firestore snapshot. Next, we need to create a repository for this. So let's come down to our repositories, and in there a new file called result repository .dart, and this is going to be our result repository class. Okay, now this class is going to need an instance of Firestore, so final Firebase Firestore, which we will call Firestore, and so we'll need to construct that. So in our constructor we will simply, when we construct it, simply make Firestore equal to Firebase Firestore dot instance, and that will take care of that. We're then going to need a couple of functions, a couple of methods in here, one that saves the result and one that gets the high scores. So let's just deal with the saving of the result first, because until we've got something in our database, there's nothing to get out. So I'm going to save result, and we need here a quiz ID because we need to know which quiz the result is linked to, and we want a result as well. And then we say Firestore collection, and we're going to create a collection here called quizzes, and I'll explain collections and docs in a minute. But we have a collection, and a collection has documents in it, and the document is going to be called the quiz ID, and in that there's going to be another collection which I'm going to call results, and what we want to do is add a document to that, which is going to be our result that we're passing in, but it needs to be as a map, so we change that to Firestore map. And that's all we need to do to save a result. So the question is, where do we want to save it? And the answer to that is when we finish the quiz. So if we come to our quiz page block, we have some code here that emits the state finished, and so there we can save it. Let's put a to-do in. To-do save quiz result to database. Now, to save it to there, this block is going to need access to both the user information and the repository that we've just created. So at the top up here, what we need to do is we're going to have to require, sorry, not require, we are going to have to require it, but we're going to need a final auth block called auth block, and we need a final result repository called result repository, and then we're going to need to require it up here to make sure we've got both of those being sent in. So we're going to need an auth block called auth block and a result repository called result repository, and then in our initializer we can say our private auth block equals the auth block that's being passed in, and our result repository equals the result repository that's being passed in. Both of those are going to be required, which is why we've got error message is there, error warnings. Okay, so we're passing in now a quiz, an auth block and a result repository, but we've got an error because we're not actually passing those in. So let's do that. We're going to pass in an auth block, and that's going to be context read, and a result repository context read. Now, you've seen us in the past do this sort of thing, you know, put the type after read, and you can absolutely do that. There's no issue there. Some will argue it's better for readability that you do that. However, you don't need to. If it's typed properly and we're saying an auth block is what we require, which we did when we set that up, then this will find an auth block for us. Putting auth block in there is redundant, and really all it's doing is adding more imports to this page, which we don't really need. Doesn't matter though whichever way you do it. Here we do need to put it, because what we're returning is a quiz, not a quiz repository, because we're actually getting a quiz from it. So we do need to be specific there about saying what type of thing we want to read. Okay, now the result repository won't work yet because we're not providing that anywhere. So let's come back to our main.dart, where we have our repository provider, and I'm going to change that into a multi-repository provider by control dot and convert to multi-repository provider. That allows us to provide multiple repositories in the same place. And so we're going to provide a result repository, like so. Okay, so we've got the quiz repository, which we were doing before, and now our result repository. So let's save that, save the quiz page, do a hot restart and make sure we've got no glaring errors. And then we can come and sign in, because we need to be signed in as a user, so we might as well do that now. So I have my remembered drag@test.com, and the password was password123, because, you know, security is important. Please provide a valid email. There's a space at the end. Okay, in we go. So we're now back in. Right, let's go back to our quizpage.block, quizpageblock.dart, sorry, and come down to our result to do. So what we need to do is see if we've got a user and if they're a guest. So let's get an app user called user, and that's going to equal our auth block dot state dot app user. Now we're getting this underline because we don't know what state it's in. So we can put that in bracket, and we can say that this state is an auth block ready state. And so we're going to get a user from our auth block ready, because we know that we're not going to be in this area unless we have an auth block ready. And then we can say if our user is a guest, well, we want to say if not a guest, then we can say final result equals a result. And the result is, well, the date is going to be the date time now converted to an ISO string. The nickname is going to be the user.displayname. The score is going to be the score of the current state. And the time taken we need to calculate, but it's going to be, in fact, let's calculate it outside of that. We'll have a final int time taken equals date time now, no, not November, now, difference date time pass state start time in seconds. Okay, so we've got our time taken, and then we can pass that in here, time taken. And then we want to save that result to the database. So we're going to wait on our result repository. Okay, we need to add the async modifier. Save result. We need the quiz ID, which we've got in our state, and the result that we've just created. And that should do it. So if we save that and hot restart our app, and then come over to our Firestore database, which is empty currently, and then run the quiz. So I'm going to do a general knowledge 2 quiz, and I'm just going to whiz through that. And that's our quiz done. Now nothing's showing up in Cloud Firestore because we haven't got a collection yet. If we hit refresh though, we can see we have a collection. So we have a collection of quizzes. The quiz has the document gen2, which is the quiz ID, and in there there's a collection of results, and we have that result that we've just done on this date, my user, and the time. Now we've got that collection set up, I'm going to do that quiz again, except I'm going to do it a little bit slower and I'm going to get questions wrong. I've got 2 wrong and 2 right, and then as soon as I click on my next button to finish the quiz, you can see that that new entry in the database has just been created and we've got our details there. Okay, let's come back to our result repository and put in the code that we need to get a list of the high scores out. So it's going to be a future because it's getting stuff over the internet. It can't return stuff immediately, although it's pretty fast. And so we're going to get a future of a list of results. And I'm going to call this get high score for quiz, because we're going to need to pass into here a quiz ID. Without a quiz ID, this isn't going to work. And then we're going to return our await on our Firestore on our collection, and that needs to be the same as above. So actually we can just copy and paste that. Okay, so we're going to get our collection of quizzes on the quiz ID that we're passing in and the results. Now I want it to be ordered, so I'm going to do ordered by the score, because I want the high scores to show up, and I'm going to set descending to true, because if we don't do that we'll just get the lowest scores at the top, and we want the highest scores at the top. I don't want every result imaginable. After thousands of users have used it and had lots of goes, there could be thousands of results. I only want to get the top 10 results, and I want to get them. Then that is, if I look at get, that is a query snapshot of maps, strings, dynamics, and that's not what we want. We want a list of results. So once we've got it, once that result has been returned to us, we're going to take the snapshot and map the snapshot of the documents. So a snapshot returns a list of documents. We can see how many documents there are, but it doesn't matter. We know how many there are. There's 10 or less for us. So we're only worried about mapping that. So we're taking the list of documents that have been returned. So in our case, currently, there's 2 documents. There's 2 results that are stored. So we're going to get them both back. We're going to map that as a document, and we're going to convert that to a result from snapshot and pass in the document, because it's a document snapshot. And then we want to convert that to a list. Okay, that is our get high scores for quiz. So where do we want the high scores to show? Well, I want them on the quiz intro page. So on our quiz intro, we have our auth prompt if they're not logged in, and then we've got an elevated button to start the quiz, and underneath that elevated button I'm going to put a high score table, and I'm going to create a new widget for this. I'm going to call this high score, and I'm going to pass in, because I know I'm going to need the quiz ID, the quiz ID. Okay, high score doesn't exist yet. It certainly should. So let's just create it down below. Stateless widget high score. We know we're passing in a quiz ID. It is a string, and that's going to be required. Now this is only going to show up if the user is authenticated. So I'm going to wrap this with a block builder and have an auth block. Let's import those that we need. And so within the state here, we're going to say if state is auth ready and the state of our app user is not a guest, then we're going to do something. If they are a guest, we're just going to return an empty container, except I'm going to change that to a sized box. So if they're not authed or they're a guest, they're not going to see anything. If they are a guest, then we're going to return if they are an authorized user, we're going to return something in here. Okay, now what we're going to need in here is a list of results. And so we're going to create here another qubit, or we haven't really created qubits, but qubits are a cut down version of a block. And we're going to create a high score qubit, which will then show up the high score once it's loaded. Otherwise, it'll just show up a circular progress indicator to show that it's loading the scores. So in our widgets directory, I'm going to come and create a new qubit, which I'm going to call high score. Okay, so we've got a state and a qubit. And you'll notice the main difference here straight away is we haven't got events. There aren't events in qubits. So let's start with our state, and we've got our high score initial, which I'm going to change to loading. And then we're going to have a high scores loaded, which extends high score state. And this is going to have a final list of results. We're going to call results. And that's going to need a constructor. So we'll generate our constructor, which will be a const, and override the props for that, just like we would with a block. Okay, so that's our high score state taken care of. Let's come to our high score qubit. And so our initial for this is going to be high score loading. And then we're going to need some things in here as well. So we're going to need a final string quiz ID. And we're also going to need access to the result repository. Okay, let's set those up. We're going to need a required this.quizid, and we need a required results repository. In our initializer, let's set those up. So we don't need to worry about the quiz ID because that's not private, but the results repository is going to equal the results repository that is passed in. Then we need to have a way of loading the high scores. So load high score, which is going to be an async function. and we're going to await here the result repository get high score for quiz ID. And once we've got that, we're going to emit a new state, high score loaded, and pass in the results, which we haven't stored anywhere. So let's do that. List results equals. Okay, so where do we call this load high score from? Well, we're going to do it from our constructor. So we're going to put our constructor in and call load high scores. So as soon as this qubit is brought to life, it's going to run this constructor, which is going to load the high scores. It's going to get a list from our repository of the high scores and then emit the new state with those results. Save that and come back to our high score widget. Okay, so I'm just going to put a container in here for a second because it's easier to wrap things. And so we need to provide, first of all, our high score qubit because we're not doing that. So let's wrap with a block provider. So even though it's a block provider, it can provide qubits as well. High score qubit, and we'll need to import that. And I did it with a lowercase s. Okay, that was silly, but instead of changing it, I will just change that to lowercase s. It's fine. That takes in a quiz ID, and we've got that, so we can put in our quiz ID. And it also takes in a result repository, which we can do with context.read. Right. Once we've provided that, we don't need to put any events in because that's straight away getting its results. We can then wrap our container in a block builder. And that's going to be the high score qubit. And we just need to correct these. So it's going to be a high score qubit and a high score state. So in our builder for that, we can say if state is high score loading, then we're just going to return a circular progress indicator. Else, if state is high score loaded, we're going to do something else. Now, the reason I can't just do else, the reason we're doing else if, is because we need to cast this state to a high score loaded so we can access its properties. We're going to have an else at the end, and this should never appear. But I'm just going to have an empty size box just in case something goes wrong. But the state should always be either high score loading or high score loaded. So in our high score loaded, we're going to return a column, and that's going to have some children in it. And I'm just thinking now we're going to need some padding at the top, so I'm just going to put a size box height of 20 in there, and then we'll have some text which will say current high scores, and then we need to get our scores. But it's possible that there aren't any scores yet for this particular quiz, so we will say if state.results is empty, then we're just going to have some text which says no high scores yet, be the first, something like that. else, so if we have got results, let's put a semicolon at the end there. If we have got a results, we're going to create a data table. So this is just a quick and dirty way of formatting this. I'm sure you can come up with a better way of making it look. So data table takes columns, and we're going to have 3 columns. Data column, we're going to have the name of the person. We're going to have the time in seconds that took, and we're going to have the score. Okay, and then we're going to have some rows. So the rows, we're going to take the state results, so all the results we've got, and we're going to map that result and return a data row. And in the row, we're going to have some cells, and there's going to have to be 3 cells as well. So we're going to have a data cell, and in the first one, we're going to have the nickname that we've stored. In the second one, we're going to have the time, and for now we'll just convert that to a string. And in the third one, we're going to have the score, which will also convert to a string. And then we will convert all of that to a list. What have we done here? Yeah, that shouldn't be in a square bracket. Okay, so we've got a data table with 3 columns, and then we've got a row, and each row is going to have 3 cells in it. Let's save that and come up to where we've got an error, and the error is that the high score isn't defined. That's because I've spelt it wrong as well. Gosh grief, I'm not doing very well today. Let's hit that F2 that and change that to high score. Okay, save that and hot restart. And now if we come to our general knowledge 2 quiz, we have our high score table. And if we come to our general knowledge 1, which we haven't got any results for, we've got no high scores yet, be the first. Okay, we could just change that a little bit by putting a sized box height of 10 in here, just to give it a little bit of space. And that looks okay. So the time we could format a little bit better. So we've already got our time. That is an integer. We've got a function where we can convert that already, which we're calling convert duration as time string, which takes a duration. Well, our time isn't a duration. Let's put a few commas in here just to format this. But we can convert that. We can say duration in seconds, our time. And I've just realized I've spelled this wrong as well. Let's go back to our helper function. Highlight it in F2. Convert duration as time string. There we are. That will fix that up. Save that. We'll get a few errors because it's replaced that everywhere. So let's just save everything that needs saving and refresh. Now, if we come to our general knowledge 2, that looks a little bit better. And of course we could play around and fix the fonts and make things look all a lot nicer, but I'm leaving it as that. So that's it there, but we do have one more little thing we need to take care of. And that is, if we switch over to our Firestore console, at the moment when we set up Firestore, we set it up with rules that allowed everybody to read and write, and that's not safe because it essentially means with a little bit of information anybody could change any score or add any score or do pretty much whatever they want or delete all the scores. So we want to get rid of that. Basically we're saying that until the 24th of March this is allowed. Well, we don't need to be too secure about it. You can go into this in a lot of depth. We're just going to cover what we need to do, and we're going to change this to say allow. We want to allow them to read the results. We don't want anybody to change the results, so I'm not going to put write, but I'm going to allow them to create, so they can create a new result, but they can only do those if the request authentication is not equal to null, i.e. if they are authorized, if that has happened. I'm going to delete this part here, and we can test that by well, hang on a second, I'm going to have to leave this page. I'm just going to copy that. I can't. No, I'm going to publish it. I'm going to publish it. I'm going to come to the data and I'm going to go to one of our results, and I'm going to just copy the path for that result and go back to the rules. And we can check it out with our rules playground here, and we can get that document as an unauthenticated user. Let's try it. No, we're denied. Can we delete it? Nope, we're denied. Well, what happens if we're authenticated, and we're authenticated with our email and password, and we'll just put in a random ID in there. It doesn't matter for testing because we're only checking whether they're authenticated or not. Okay, can we delete? No. Can we update? No. Could we create it if it wasn't already there? Yes. And can we read the result? Yes. So there we are. We can see that we can get our information, and now it's not open to the world. Of course, we should come back to our emulator. We should do a hot restart. We can try that again. So let's go to General Knowledge 2. We're still getting our results because we are authenticated. And if we do the quiz one final time, this time I'll get 3 questions wrong and 1 right. And we should have now our new entry in our database, which we do. So there you go, folks. That is it. I'm not doing any more with this particular app. It's a foundation for you to take on and do whatever you want. I'm currently working on the next series, which will be coming fairly soon, and is going to be an even longer series where we're going to build a fully featured app right from the start, including the design in terms of not the graphic design. I will almost certainly be using something else because I'm not a designer, but in terms of design of the app, functionality and everything else. So I hope you come and join me for that journey, and we'll see you next time. Till then, if you enjoyed, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. It does help me out, and hit that notification icon to find out when we're next here. Till then, take care, folks. We'll see you soon. Bye now.